We are live.
Farah?
Hello and welcome to Adamana Podcast, episode 9. We are talking about shamans today, and we have a special guest with us. Convict, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Comic Fish. I raid with the guild Skill Banner, which is currently US 4th, 10-man, and I play a Resto Shaman.
You sure you don't play a Resto Druid?
I do that as well.
Wow.
I have all the healers at 90, but I play the Shaman the most.
Awesome. So, there's been a lot of controversy over shamans. Are they viable? Are they not? Are they bad? Are they not? What can happen to fix them? Do they need to be fixed? Yada, yada, yada. So, we decided to devote maybe not an entire show, but the bulk of one to talk about that. So, I guess we'll let our guest start us out and saying what he thinks a shaman's problem are or how they could be fixed. So, Convict?
Sure. It's interesting. I think, like, at the moment, just looking at HPS, Shamans are not doing very well, but, like, as much as Blizzard has said they don't want anything like a utility tax, I think it's pretty existent at the moment. Maybe only with Shamans. I think Druids maybe suffer from it a little bit. I think Druids might be a little bit behind, but and you know their utility is fairly far behind, like a Shaman or a Disc. But I think the way to fix Shamans is to do something with Chain Heal. I think Chain Heal needs to be just completely reworked. Something like the glyph of chaining as baseline, that jump distance, that needs to be baseline. I think the cast time needs to be reduced, and I think the throughput needs to be buffed again. Whatever like compensation like is required to change Healing Rain or Healing Tide Totem or whatever is required to do that. Like for like a gut Healing Rain, gut Healing Tide Totem, give me Chain Heal that is actually usable on fights that are anything other than like Megara in the current tier where people are stacked.
Right. I mean, I can see glyph of chaining being good baseline. It would help out a little bit when it comes to things, but I think to an extent, and a lot of shamans also are saying that, you know, we're too tied to Healing Rain. And I think someone on the World of Warcraft forums were saying if we changed the spell work a little bit and made or gave shamans a second spell or something smaller area of effect but followed a person around, it could also help with spread healing fights or at least movement phases.
I think something that would go a long way helping is to fix the stupid glyph of Riptide. If it didn't knock out the vast majority of the healing by glyphing it, it could be a viable source of movement healing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like Glyph Riptide as it is, I barely ever use it because the initial heal from Riptide, especially with like high amounts of mastery, which you're just going to passively get in high amounts of gear, is like incredible. Like I've crit people for as much as healing waves and stuff just with a Riptide, which is like instant cast and leaves a hot.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think if they kept the glyph, if they changed it a little bit so it doesn't take down the amount of healing so much. What is it down to, like 10%? If they took it down to 50, that way you still got a burst but left the hot and took a cooldown off it, it'd be a little bit better. But I don't think they should keep it and allow it to be have no cooldown, leave the hot, and its full initial burst healing. Especially since, as you said, I've crit and hit with Riptide definitely high enough as a healing wave would.
I think a good move would be move Riptide to maybe 50%, the Glyph of Riptide, 50% of the initial heal, and give it a 3-second cooldown, which is half the normal cooldown, which would then functionally allow it to be like no cooldown. You can't really multi-hot quite as well, but you can keep your tidal waves rolling, which is the same sort of like reason. That's the reason like most shamans take Glyph of Riptide, is just to keep the tidal waves rolling. But like, if you just give it a 3-second cooldown, then that should be fine to fill that role, and also give it a bit of a buff without it being sort of a bit silly.
Well, what do you think, Ein?
I honestly, from at least my experience of playing around with it, because I haven't really been playing as much this expansion, but for the amount that I have played, I really don't feel that they're behind so much as the fights don't work for them that much. If the fights were stack fights, like maybe tier 13, tier 14, I think Shamans would be really, really far ahead. I know that spread healing has always been a concern, even back through Dragon Soul, but I'm not sure that changing Glyph of Riptide or even reworking Chain Heal would really be that big of a fix, and it'd just be another bothersome thing, because they'd have to get, I guess, scaled back to compensate for that. See what I'm saying? You can't just buff something and then expect it to... Because right now, their stacked healing is extremely strong, and it has its purposes, and if you're not overhealing something, then they're like probably one of the best stack healers, period. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I agree with that, but like, at the same time, the fights don't favor us at the moment, yeah, but even in a stacked scenario, like all 10 people or even all 25 people, I can't speak for 25, but this is an educated guess, I'd say. We're still not the strongest healer. Like, surely if our spread healing is that weak, we should be the strongest healer, right?
I don't know.
Who would you feel is stronger at stack healing than Shaman? Because I'm going to have to agree
Paladins.
with that. I think that's more Paladins needing to be toned down rather than Shamans needing to be toned up.
One of the main reasons a Paladin would be better at stack healing is because their AoE heals work with their mastery that puts an absorption on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think that that Paladins need to be toned down too much, but they need to be toned down somewhat. Especially since they're able to compete a little bit now with a Disc Priest absorption. Not much, but they can still compete with absorptions on a class that's supposed to be the main absorption class.
Sorry, and speaking for Paladins, I definitely think that they're a little bit strong in the absorb department, and they definitely should have their mastery nerfed just at least a little bit.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the problem comes from. If like EF didn't benefit from mastery and their mastery wasn't as strong, they'd probably be just as good as any other healer.
Now, the couple of attempts that I've done on, and I'm going to butcher his name, Shinrock or whatever, the first boss in there, on my Shaman, I've healed with a Resto Druid and a Holy Paladin, and on the fights where we have the DPS in the puddles, I can normally top the charts, whether it's because of just that buff that they're taking it or not. But just with Healing Rain, I'm able to keep them alive while focusing everything else on the tanks. So, I have to disagree to an extent that Paladins, maybe they're on par with a Shaman in spread healing, But Shamans are still probably my go-to if you need really good spread healers, or stacked healers, sorry, not spread.
Hmm. I think also for a lot of normal mode raiders, some of the problems they might be seeing is they're actually overhealing things. So say you have 3 healers for Shinrock, like a guild that might be a little bit more capable and have DPS that doesn't stand and stuff. They might see that 2 healing it would make their Resto Shaman more effective because the mastery kicks in a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But to the group that I run with for Shinrock, I don't trust the Resto Druid that much, so...
Yeah.
If I could, I would be like, let's just do... sorry, I don't trust the Paladin that much. The Druid I do, but if I could, I'd have the Druid go Boomkin, just have the Paladin in myself. But there have been times where he's either lagged out, or he just hasn't healed for X amount of time.
Right.
But I definitely agree there that 2 healing things can make Shaman shine more. But also, when Shaman's healing with an absorption class, or you're getting to the point where the mastery isn't going to kick in as much as, say, if I was healing with just a Resto Druid or a Holy Priest.
Yep, exactly.
Exactly, yeah. And because they're strong right now, they're also popular, so Disc and Paladin are like probably the 2 most popular healing specs, I'd say. At least in 10-man.
I'd say Disc
and so
is.
it does look worse.
Right.
But this comes down to the point of one of the next questions of, is it Shamans as a class, or is it just the healing makeup of a lot of raids that are making Shamans look bad?
It's a bit of both.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of both. I'd say more so because people cry wolf a lot on a lot of things. I don't think from the logs that I've seen and from a lot of progression yields that I've been talking to about Shamans, they really just don't say that Shamans are that bad. It's just that other classes are that much better. Paladins are just the one thing their toolkit applies to everything. You can use them for every single fight and they shine. Priests, you can use them because they're absorption healers, and those are the best for progression all around. And Shamans just really don't have anything that really makes them stand out, especially during this tier where the fights just aren't stack fights.
Yeah.
I'd say the Shaman cooldowns stand out.
Well,
That's
yes,
about
definitely.
It, though, yeah. I think Shamans have the best toolkit in terms of cooldowns, like we have.
When you were
Pretty
talking
much
about
3 individual raid cooldowns.
Yeah. When you're talking about utility tax earlier, I agree with that, and then I disagree at the same time. I kind of in the middle ground with that. They have a really good toolkit for pretty much everything except for spread healing, and even their spread healing is really not that bad. You just can't focus on that.
Well, we at least, coming from Firelands into Dragon Soul into Mist of Pandaria, we've gotten a little bit more force spread healing with Healing Tide Totem and Ascendance, but it's still not able to hold off to a lot of other, like a Druid or anything else.
Right, but that Druid's whole toolkit's based on spread healing minus
Exactly.
Swift Mend, so...
Exactly, but I do like a Shaman's toolkit, especially since we have a group-wide mitigation, and then you have our Mana Tide and a Healing Tide.
Yeah, so I think that... I mean, a utility tax, yes and no, but they do have a lot of utility, which can't be denied at all. Plus, the Ancestral Vigor buff, maybe? Is that the health one?
That's quite nice.
Yeah, that's
especially
very,
on
very
tanks. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, from a lot of the Resto Shamans that I've talked to that are high in progression, even in 25-man, they generally drop Healing Rain on their tanks just for that extra health buff. And that really does help. That's a huge thing in itself.
I do the same thing. I will, before the pool, I'll heal whichever tank's going to pull more a little bit just to give him an extra bit of health. And then unless I need Healing Rain somewhere else, I will drop it on the 2 tanks to keep them with the extra health that they would get.
Yeah, if your comp doesn't have any melee, it's going to make you suffer a little bit, obviously.
Yeah, but...
because you're wasting the Healing Rain almost.
True, but I've also rather would, my comp does have melee, which is nice, but I'd rather keep a tank alive if that extra 16,000 health can do it over making my heals per second look better than everybody else.
Yeah. In a way, the actual healing rain's kind of niche in itself, the way it works, it kind of forces your raid to adjust to healing rain while you're making your strats. Like, you have to put healing rain in your strat. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if
I agree.
anybody.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done that as well.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
And
When we're
our
doing progression on Horadon, I think we're sort of like we had to compensate for healing rate a fair bit. Like our original strat was we were trying to sort of run as quickly as we could to try and spread out the sort of frost orbs and lightning totems and things that they drop. Try and spread those out so it was less density and easier to avoid. And I couldn't healing rain when we were doing that because we were moving so much that like I would put it down and people would run out straight away. So we sort of had to adjust and like slow the whole thing down and just so that I would be effective.
Right. Like, I guess another fight would be Garrelon. Did you have your range like stand in the middle just so they could get all the healing rate? Yeah.
We marked out Paladin and myself with a star and said, "Stuck on the star or you'll die."
Yep. I think that's just one thing a raid has to take in consideration when they are running with a shaman, is that you have to put healing rain somewhere in your strat, or else you're just gonna waste the shaman's waste their toolkit, basically.
Right, and I mean,
Definitely.
When you're a raider, is that a big hindrance on a raid if you have to change your strategy a little bit to compensate for healing rain, or does it make it easier, or is it just more annoying?
Go ahead.
I think it's more annoying than, like, it's not like, oh, I'm not going to bring a shaman because it's going to change our strat, but like, if you press for time on a week, or you're in a position where a fight is still really difficult, even after you've killed it once or twice, they may not bring a shaman because it is more difficult to adjust to a strategy, or it's more difficult to have have him be in there. So like, for example, I haven't done Heroic Tortoise. My guild has killed it 3 times now. I still haven't done it because a lot of the time we're pressed for time, we're trying to clear our farm as quickly as possible so we can get to progression, and I don't want to be in there and slowing people down by not being able to heal spread very effectively.
So I think what it comes down to is shamans do need a little bit of help with their spread healing, but not so much that... But it's not so bad that they're still not viable healers when it comes to raiding in this tier.
I think they're viable. You'd still take one, I think. In most scenarios. Like, I think Tortoise is probably a bad example. It's a very badly designed fight.
Well, I know the only classes that I know that aren't having issues with Tortoise are Paladins and Disc Priests. Like, I know Druids are having some problems. Not major problems, not as much as Shamans, but are having some. Same thing with Holy Priests.
Yeah, Disc does very well on normal Tortoise. On Heroic, there's a mechanic that is basically a big absorb shield where healing equals absorbs. So most discs play Holy on that, I think, as far as I know. But I definitely agree that they're both really strong on that fight.
I think the main thing with Tortoise is it's hard for people who don't have a lot of instant casts, especially when you have those spinning turtles out.
Like, long cast times are really bad for Tortoise. Like, I mean, Paladins are going to struggle to a degree if they don't have the last tier's 4 set, I think, because it makes a big difference on the amount of times they're doing big, long, hard casts, as opposed to sort of instant casts like Word of Glories and Holy Shocks and stuff. But I think they're still really strong in that fight, despite the cast time sort of issue.
Yeah. I mean,
especially in 10-man, EF blanketing is going to be extremely strong.
Yeah.
right. Even in LFR's Tortos, it's hard on a lot of classes that have the long cast time.
Yeah, because no one kills the turtles.
Well, mainly because of that, but I find myself using certain totems on cooldown on that fight just because I can't get a lot of my casts out. But, Joe, Vero, you have anything to add?
The only thing I think a lot of people complaining about shamans are completely not recognizing the value of the cooldowns they have, and mastery more so. It's the HPS. I don't know how much exactly lower it is than other classes. I'm not buying into the 40 whatever percent. Some people are saying, but even if it's lower, if somebody came to me and said, okay, your HPS is going to be lower than others, but to compensate for that, we're going to give you a few buttons that if the raid's about to die or the tank's about to die, you can push these buttons and they won't die. I think that's a fair trade-off personally, but yeah, that's my opinion.
So something along the lines of a shaman may be lower than everybody else, but on this fight where there's a lot of
needed,
like say Megara on the rampage phase.
It's not even fight specific though. They have the ability to save a raid.
No, I was just giving that as an example.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of AoE damage coming out, they have this button where their mastery comes into play really well.
I just feel more than any other class, they have ability to prevent wipes, and I don't think people that are being super complaining either don't realize that or are neglecting to mention it to further their point. I don't know which the case is, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, that's kind of what the entire shaman class is about, is preventing wipes. Their mastery is meant to do that. Like, the lower the person gets, the more healing it's going to do.
And that works even with, like... And it's nice, especially... I forget who it was, but someone was saying on Empress they were able to... One of their healers died at, like, 20% or something. Probably, maybe lower, I don't remember. But they were able to keep their... a lot of their raid up through Healing Rain with their mastery. Maybe it was Mist who said that? The shaman in his group. Something like that.
That sounds fair enough. Like, I think Empress Phase 3 shamans are really strong. And I think that the ability to throw out the saving heals, yeah, looks quite good. But like at the moment, I mean, in this tier, there's a lot of mechanics that either don't do any damage at all or they one-shot. So if people do survive it, which is like not particularly common, I guess, they're going to be low and we're going to be able to top them off, but how much of that is shaved off by like a disc absorb or a holy pally absorb, or whether they just straight up die, is sort of like this tier is not working in our favor in that element.
Then the design change. The design changes need to be focused on not designing tiers that are completely unfriendly to, if that's the case, to the shaman toolkit.
Yeah.
Other than my class is broken, fix it. The class I think.
I
functions.
don't think shamans are broken. I think chain heal is broken, and I think that's sort of reflecting. I think that's sort of a major issue, and it's making things look a lot worse than they are. And that the tier is not tailored to our stack healing, so we need to use chain heal more, and we need to be using a sort of glyph type of chain heal more, but that's not an option because it's so weak.
would you agree that it's because I know 25 man they consistently use chain heal and have no issues, but I think that it's just the 10 man not having enough people to fill the chain heal is the issue really. So,
yeah, unless a group is stacked up, in most fights I'll probably get 2 or maybe 3 bounces.
yeah,
And that's it.
it's almost not even worth casting at that point.
Pretty much 2.2 second cast with my value of haste.
Yep. So I mean, they really have to try to find a way to make it good for 10 man, but not good for 25. The only way I think they could do that is extend the range. That would be the.
Yep. I think so.
Yeah.
I think
And-
it needs a little bit more than just a range increase there, but I don't know. It like you said, it's very difficult to not have things be overpowered in 25 to be viable in 10.
Right. Yeah, I know that's why the main reason why they haven't buffed it is because then it would just be chain heal spam all over again. Drop healing range, chain heal spam. But I mean, that's basically what it already is in 25 man for the most part.
My only fear is we're going to get another tier like Dragon Soul where it's a lot of stacking and Shamans are just going to shine again and make it look like that they don't need anything.
Well, there was a lot of stacking in tier 14, at least in normals. I can't speak to heroics, but
Well,
it
this was
not,
broken.
It was
tier 14.
well. Regardless, I'm just saying there were,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we get another stacked one because last year was stacked for the most part as well.
It seems that going on rating tiers, it goes from a stacked tier to a spread tier, back to a stacked tier, and just repeats. It doesn't seem like there's many variation when it comes to Blizzard making their raid tiers.
Well, so, to be honest, the stack tier is honestly probably the most boring thing you can do. See Dragon Soul,
Yeah.
Shamans are awesome. And
But I'm
I
bored out
just-
of my mind.
but it
It was
literally-
condemned as like the worst tier since Trial of the Crusader.
Yeah.
Well, it was
Yeah.
quite horrible.
I think Trial of the Crusader is actually better than Dragon Soul.
Well, when you're talking about Dragon Soul,
Well, I had fun.
I liked it the first few times that I ran through, and then after it became farm content, it's just like, what do I do now? This is a stacked part of the phase, I drop Healing Rain, and I LOL for 10 seconds. So,
Yeah, At that point, I was in a guild that did 3 light Yogg, and then when TOC came out, we were just like, yeah, this is interesting. Like when you first go in there with like just old war gear, it was actually a pretty tough instance. I mean, even though it was gated, we went in there and just killed the bosses as we could. But a noob was the nightmare. Like all the bosses were insane. But Dragon Soul just felt like we just mowed through it.
in Dragon Soul, it was very much so the hype that Blizzard put up to it, and then I just think they really failed when they actually came to developing the raid itself. Because for an entire expansion pack, we have this giant dragon flying around, scorching us, killing everything, almost killing the leader of the Red Dragon fight, and all of this, and then we don't actually technically get to fight him. We fight on his back, and then we push him into a pit.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that Spine of Deathwing and Madness Deathwing were definitely the 2 hardest fights in that tier.
Just because I all agree where they were the hardest, but that doesn't mean that they were the most fun boss fights.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not.
I think Spine was mechanically fun. Like, it's sort of like a unique kind of fight, and like, if you wanted to, if a friend had just picked up the game and wanted to get into raiding, and you wanted to show them some interesting encounters, you'd probably take them to Spine. But like at that time, I think it was pretty tedious. And Madness especially was like 4 platforms too long. It was just like silly.
It got to like, and the first few times where I saw the Madness fight, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool, but then the only way, after you got farm content on it, the only way you could really change it up was your order of platforms. And even then, it was technically the same thing every platform.
Yeah,
attack
it had
the
minimal
appendage,
impact.
attack the giant tendril thing, attack this, attack that, and then attack his face.
I think
Fight
the worst part about those two fights was the necessity to class stack. Even in 10-man, you had to have specific classes for it. Like having a Resto Shaman was awesome because you could Spirit Link the tendons and spine, and then having like a Disc Priest to take impales just made Madness a joke. Or not Disc Priest, Shadow Priest to disperse the impales. Like, you almost needed those classes in 10-man when you first went in there. And like, our comp didn't have a Shadow Priest, and our comp didn't have like a hunter at the time that knew what he was doing, and our comp didn't have a paladin in it, so we couldn't like sack, and we didn't have a priest healer, so we couldn't use any pain subs or anything. It was just like, we just screwed ourselves because we didn't have the right comp. And it made it dramatically easier when we just kind of like got a bunch of people, plugged it, and we killed it. It was an absolute joke when we had the right comp. I'm talking about heroic, mind you. Yeah, that was the two fights I pretty much despised the entire tier because of how class dependent they were.
I can't hear you if you're talking, Shammy.
I unmuted my mic after coughing. But I have yet to down Madness of Deathwing on heroic because my guild got a later start in it on as more so than everybody else. So I only have a few bosses down on heroic, but even on regular, there were some times where, especially on my shaman, I was always reforging so with that 5% haste I would get from a boomkin in mind. And then when we had to 3 heal on 1 or 2 fights because my guild wanted the 2 Resto Druids instead of just 1 and myself, I would lose a lot of haste. Even in the on heroic fights that I've done, that hurt a little bit, but not quite as bad as a lot of I know a lot of people who would be saying it could have. But it just goes to raid comp that when you know you're going to get a 5% haste buff, you're able to reforge some haste out of other things.
Right. Well, you didn't really get a haste buff throughout that entire fight, depending on the kill order. Most people take Caligos done last.
Well, I mean, I've only done up to spine on heroic.
Oh, okay.
So we were 3 healing heroic spine because we had pretty good DPS. And somebody in the Twitch chat said Kata lacked endgame raid period. An endgame raid period. DS wasn't really an endgame content.
Yeah. I think the first tier was in Kato was amazing to me.
Tier 11.
I really liked that.
I love tier 11 fights. I liked Fireland fights. I think some of the Fireland mechanics were just really unique. Like
Firelands put a lot of people's computers in a hurt locker, though.
Yes, that's very true. It was
especially on 25 man.
It was very graphics heavy. But I mean, which one was it? Ryloth, where you're fighting his feet instead of the actual boss for part of it?
Ryloth,
yeah.
And you have to make him...
I thought that was interesting, yeah.
Make him move in different places and actually have him walk by attacking his feet. I thought that was a really unique way of doing a fight.
Our guild got that achievement on our first kill because, not by design, but because we didn't have anybody that could actually handle driving the boss. So we just turned him one direction. I had no idea the achievement was even there.
Exact same thing, yeah.
My guild,
we got it on the first kill.
My guild got the achievement for spine, the left-right, I think it's do a barrel roll? Not because we planned it out, but because people were attacking the wrong tendrils, so I was having them stacking on other sides. I didn't even know that was an achievement until after we got it.
Yep, whoops.
Yeah, we always had like the same 3 or 4 people die on the Alice Razor tornadoes as soon as they came out, and after a while, you start asking them what's going on and whatnot. So I moved because I found a safe spot, and there are like 3 or 4 of them, but I found a safe spot, and so I moved to see what's going on with these people. And as soon as those tornadoes would come out, their character wouldn't move for like 5 or 6 seconds, and I'm like, oh, they don't have the machine to handle this. They probably just dropped down to 2 frames, and they don't want to say it because they'll get sat.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a gaming computer, and some of the fights that I plugged a 25-man Firelands for were hurting mine. Like, not so bad as other machines, but I would be dropping into single frames for a couple of seconds.
That doesn't sound. That sounds like driver issues, but I don't know. I never had any trouble. I've been using the same computer since Wrath.
Well, I didn't upgrade my driver until Dragon Soul, so...
I didn't have any issues either, and I play on a laptop.
Well, Joe, that's just because you're really, really good. Joe, you could probably turn your machine off after seeing a fight and heal without seeing what's going on.
We'll have to try that sometime. I'm kidding.
Don't tell
Not
your
when I'm
raid
tanking.
You don't trust me, Ryan?
I trust you with my life, but I want you watching just the same.
I did a ICC raid the other day with some friends with their guildies didn't have any, like, they were running with some 80s and 81s and all that, and I was the only 90 healer. So it got to one of the fights that on 25-man on Gunship, and I'm pretty much like, just stand in the middle and kill the guys on the other side, and I'll just heal everybody over here, and you guys can focus on the tank on the other side, on the other ship. And it actually was me dropping Healing Rain and tabbing out and coming back to drop another Healing Rain. And
How many shamans don't do that? That's the question.
Well, that's true, but the funny part of this was they were trying to tell me something in the actual chat, and I wasn't paying attention because I'm in the IRC. And then they finally asked me on vent, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't paying attention to the fight at all, what's going on? But apparently I had a ad beating on me, and I wasn't moving to take it to the tank.
I'd have been like, there's this thing called taunt. Try it. Try it sometime.
It helps. This wonders. But we got off track, so...
Yeah.
Back to Shaman and Tier 15.
What's wrong with Shaman in Tier 15?
Nothing, really.
No, I've seen a lot of really crazy posts, though. And then, like, people would be posting with their logs, and there's some people that would not be using Healing Stream Totem at all. And, like, that kind of stuff just makes me wonder a little bit. And then also, like, I'll see a lot right now, especially people saying, well, logs are really bad. Here's raid bots. They're not doing very well in raid bots. But the thing is that a lot of, like, the top 100 guilds aren't posting logs right now. So they're not getting added into the fray, basically, of shamans that are being taken.
Right.
I really don't think there's a good method of measuring performance right now. Like, as you said, with raid bots, it's fundamentally flawed in that most of the top guilds have private logs at the moment. And at the same time, people posting individual logs, like, they're also flawed because they're not using Healing Stream Totem, or they don't have Earth Living Weapon on, or, all sorts of, like,
or
nonsense like that. So how do we... Yeah, how do we measure this? Like,
I mean, I've seen people link logs from LFRs just to prove a point, and they won't have Earth Shield on a tank, or they'll be using Riptide the entire time, or they'll be using Chain Heal the entire time.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, what do you expect?
Yeah, like Earth Shield up times like 13%. Something crazy like that.
I mean, if I'm the only shaman in there, I'm switching my Earth Shield on whichever tank currently has the boss. I actually got yelled at for doing that by a priest.
I'd tell them, get off your back. That's how it roll.
Stop switching your Earth Shield. I'm bubbling that target. My Earth Shield stops your bubble?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, is my absorb getting in the way of your absorb?
It goes back to Lich King, one of the posts that I saw on the forums of priests need to stop bubbling warrior tanks. It messes with their rage generation.
What? No, that never happened.
It happened.
Oh my gosh. I remember getting yelled at when I was leveling my my priest for the first time. And they were like, stop bubbling me, it makes me not get as much rage. I'm like, you are got to be the stupidest person I've ever healed in the dungeon before.
You get the bulk of your rage from dodging and everything.
Well, it used to be they couldn't generate rage on hits that didn't, on attacks that didn't hit them, but that was changed in Wrath.
Exactly.
So.
Like in
Was it Wrath?
Yeah, it was
start of Wrath.
like the first patch of Wrath.
Yeah,
the patch that went into Wrath is where they changed it. Because I do remember in Burning Crusade, the priest in the guild that I was raiding with at the time could not bubble our warrior tank because until she had rage, because she was just getting nothing.
Yeah.
But
I mean, so on our end, like basically the conclusion of measuring shaman performance, it really isn't so much in the how much the spells heal for, because the toolkit of a shaman just really is a lot different than others, because they're not a pure HPS class. They are like a life-saving class. They have a lot of utility, and that can just be measured by its usefulness, really. So, I mean, in comparison to other classes, depending on what you need, like, would you say, like, as a shaman is currently right now, is the usefulness of a shaman really just not that useful for the tier?
I think shamans are still really useful for the tier. I just think people are not wanting to change strats in order to accommodate some of a shaman's utility, and it's making them look worse. Or they're just forgetting a lot of utility and a lot of a shaman's toolkit.
Can I piggyback on something you said, Ian?
Sure thing.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I pushed mine to 90 a lot sooner than I intended to was, just to see for myself some various things. And with the three, long shaman threads that have been on the forum here recently and whatnot, I've been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of comparing.
That can be dangerous.
Yeah, the smoke is just streaming out of my ears, but I feel like I do feel like shamans are missing something, but I think this is my opinion. I think they're missing something different than what most people are talking about. When you're playing a priest, or you're playing a paladin, or even a druid, and for the most part the Mistweaver, they all have that go-to something. If the crap hit is hitting the fan, or if what you're doing is not working, or whatever, or if you just want to be lazy in the LFR, they all have that something, that go-to that they can lean on and look okay, and it works. And the shaman just doesn't seem to have that. And Healing Rain is not it. And the Stream Totem is not it. And Chain Heal, even in 25, is also not it, even though I use it that way. Chain Heal is my top heal by a significant margin, all the time.
Yeah.
But,
and 25 mans.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, that's kind of where I'm standing with the shaman right now, is that that one piece just seems to not be there. And if Blizzard is going to do something, I would think maybe that's the direction that they should address, is filling that gap, filling that void, even if you have to use a current piece of the toolkit to do it. But that go-to just doesn't seem to be there. Now,
Good.
That's why I like the shaman the most, is because you can lull your way through the other four classes. You really can. But with the shaman, there's that extra bit of room to where if you are a really skilled healer, that's the class where you can see it. That's the class where you can really flex and go.
Yeah,
And so that's why I like it.
I really agree with that. It does feel a lot more rewarding if you are using recalls. If you're recalling your totems, you're using if you're using just a bit of healing tide totem, enough to where it'll heal the raid up, and then you're recalling it, you get all your mana back, and then you can use that somewhere else. And I think that when you do that, and you just do all the little gimmicks for the class, it becomes really rewarding for you and your raid, because I mean you're actually able to outperform in a way.
Exactly, and I mean that's some of the things that I actually will do is, like you said, you leave Tide out just enough that it heals the raid to full, and then pull it back in to
Right.
regain mana and everything.
Yeah, things like that. I think that, like he was saying, that there's something different about Shaman, and I think it's really that Shaman are the only class, maybe except for Priests, that you just hit a button to get more healing. Or you just... I mean, Healing Tide Totem's kind of there, but like Paladins have output surges, like they can... I don't remember what the skill's called, but like you got wings and things like that, where you just do more healing. It's like the solution to more damage is more healing.
Yeah.
Just with a regular toolkit. You just use your normal toolkit to do that healing. Whereas like Shaman just have a button they have to press, but they can heal along with it. So like Healing Rain, you can put it down and then you can heal with Healing Rain. And you could drop a totem, then you could heal with Healing Tide Totem if you want to, but chances are you probably won't need to with the rest of your co-healers. A lot of... in another sense, like a lot of a problem that Shamans can face is that the other healers are doing too much work. They're actually just sniping off the Shaman. That, like when I was in tier 11 and I was healing at the beginning, we were 3 healing things because we were just a casual guild at first, and then we dropped and I went DPS because it was pretty much pointless bringing me to a raid with a Disc Priest and a Resto Druid at the time, because they would just absorb and hot everything, and I could never use my mastery.
There would be a couple of times where, in tier 13, where I would pug a raid because I wouldn't heal on my, I wasn't healing on my Shaman because we had already gone to farm content and I wanted to get some gear for my Hunter. So I would pug something on my Shaman, or put a pug group together with alts for my guild, and we would end up pugging a healer, and they would just go because they're just trying to make up for that extra little extra little tick of damage I would allow through to get a little bit more out of my mastery. And I would know I wasn't putting the raid in danger, but they would end up going and always ask me why I wasn't healing, and they would just snipe all of the heals, and I would have to explain to them that extra tick isn't going to put the entire raid into danger, and it's letting me get more out of my mastery so you don't have to do as much.
Right. I think like that could be very well another problem with Shaman is other healers. In some sense.
Yeah, with Mana Tide Totem as it is at the moment, especially in 25 man, like people are calling Shaman like mana batteries and things, and I think to a degree it's true. Like I mean, the regen of the other healers is based on not having Mana Tide Totem. So when it is present, like things are gonna be way different for the other healers. Like,
And in a
I
way,
can't really speak for the other healers on that front because I haven't like rated on and alt with a Resto Shaman and with that. But like to me, it seems as though like if I have this massive like income of mana, it's gonna make a big difference to my throughput, especially like if my throughput is based on how much, you know, like mana cost rather than like GCDs, if that makes sense.
yeah. So I mean, like you could look at it in a way where things like Mana Tide that are benefiting the other healers. What if you took all of the healing they did with that mana and then put it towards the Shaman's healing?
Exactly.
Because effectively, that's what it is. It's the Shaman's
giving
utility.
the mana for those healers to keep those numbers up.
So, that being the case, if the throughput that they're giving the other healers, if they weren't giving it to the other healers, if it would be theirs, why are some 25-man shamans forcing themselves to their own gearing choices to be mana batteries? Why don't they put that into improving their own throughput?
I know personally in Tier 14 when I was healing, I was stacking a lot of spirit just because my co-healers needed that extra spirit in order to be extremely viable. But now that all healers healers don't seem to be having very many mana issues, I have switched to stacking other stats. I've gone back to like crit and mastery stacks instead of making sure I have spirit on everything.
Yeah.
And like
It's something I've been looking at doing as well. I mean, I'm not having any mana issues on like one of the most healing intense fights in the tier, Heroic Megara, so I think that's something I'm definitely going to be looking at in the next couple of weeks.
and I've even
Dropping some spirit.
I've even stopped flasking spirit when I'm going into raids or LFR and everything, and I've started flasking intel for that extra spell power to help my throughput.
I mean, that's basically what you need to do. Just have enough mana to heal, and if you don't need it, then you don't need it.
Because in Tier 14, it seemed that there were more healers that were having issues with mana.
Even in Tier 14, I don't believe any healer, if they were playing correctly, should have had many issues, to the point that they should have been forcing their shamans to gimp themselves to give them enough mana to
Well, I
heal
wasn't
wrong.
even stacking spirit. I wasn't gimped in Tier 14. Just because there's a lot of stacking phases that I could drop Healing Rain and rock up the
I don't
numbers.
mean gimped as in...
I know what you meant.
If you can heal a certain amount and you lower that, even if that lowered amount is still enough, you've still gimped your own personal throughput for somebody else's.
Yeah.
So I do have a question for Convict in a 10-man sense. So would you say that a problem for a shaman isn't necessarily their throughput, but it's the fact that they need quality of life changes, like chain heal?
Yeah, I think chain heal would be a big quality of life change. Like, I mean, for spread AoE healing, what can we do at the moment? I mean, we drop healing stream totem and then what? We spot heal with like Riptide and Healing Surge and Greater Healing Wave and stuff. Like, chain heal is not a viable option to heal anything except stack healing, where we also have Healing Rain. That doesn't really make sense. Like, I have 2 heals to stack for AoE stacking, but I have 1 for spread healing. Like,
Yeah, I mean, even something like making like a healing wave used while moving would help.
yeah, something like that would be nice.
Did you see what I posted in that thread, Shammy? My glyph of Riptide.
No, but I can pull it up and look.
Well, I mean, I remember what I typed. It
Oh,
it seemed to
you
have
were
gotten
saying.
buried. Nobody said anything about it, so it was either that awesome or that bad. One of the two. But I just suggested they change the glyph of Riptide so that when you cast Healing Surge, it resets the cooldown on Riptide. And then maybe boost the mana cost of Riptide a little bit to keep that from being something that you always use. But that way, I don't know, I can't see a downside to that, and I think that would help with spread healing an awful lot without having to mess with chain heal.
Yeah, actually I do, yeah. I agree with that.
I mean, the heal on Riptide would be exactly what it is now. It just, you'd have to manage your mana because you're using Healing Surge to reset that cooldown to throw out another Riptide. So
Yeah, I even think like almost without an increased mana cost because of that glyph, it would be okay because Surge is like reasonably expensive. I don't think that'd be sustainable for huge periods of time and to like such a huge degree that it'd be overpowered.
I mean, even something like a Riptide that builds up 3 times, and like like the stacking ability, it's like it build up 3 times so you can use it 3 times in a row. That kind of thing would be really useful. Or even something where if you used Riptide while moving, you wouldn't get tidal wave you wouldn't get tidal waves, but you could use it, or not what type of movie. Like greater healing wave by moving, it wouldn't be affected by haste or tidal waves, or it wouldn't be affected by tidal waves rather, something like that. Just some mechanical changes, little things here and there might be more useful.
I assume that you have spell haste in your raid, right, Convict?
Yeah.
What am I?
What at your gear level? What's the if you went all haste? What's the lowest you could get your chain heal to? 1.8,
Oh.
1.9. I mean, I haven't tried it
If I was
at my gear
picking
level.
up pieces that are only if I was picking up pieces that are like Spirit Haste, Haste Mastery, or Haste or something, rather than having pieces that are like Spirit Crit and reforging to Haste, I think I could probably hit maybe 1.7, probably 1.8.
Yeah.
I think of what the math was like 163 would be, which would come down to 1.6. If you had haste, like if you stacked only haste plus the 5% from your raid.
So when you look at, the fact that you can do that now, if they arbitrarily lowered the cost of chain heal, someone in your gear level is now knocking on the door to 1 second chain heal. So chain heal, like I said, it's my favorite thing in the world. I love those blue beams coming out of my female Draenae's hands. It's awesome, and I use it all the time. But you can't give me a faster chain heal.
Well, they
You
can't
can't
do
do
that
it.
for 25-man, because 25-man would just spam the crap out of it.
They say no, Ian. The people on the forums say no, it's not being done now, and it wouldn't be done then.
Yeah, they're full of it.
Are you really going to trust the forums?
Yeah. No, you wouldn't. Well, some of these people are knowledgeable, Shannon. So anyway.
Like who? Cal's Tiberia?
Oh,
well,
name drop.
You wouldn't, if they did something like that with chain heal, or even if they gave you 4 guaranteed bounces on a 10-man. Me personally, I mean, I do things different than most a lot of the time, but I probably would not use a single target heal ever unless someone was about to take a dirt nap. Otherwise, it would just be chain heal, chain heal, chain heal, and fun, away we go.
I think that's kind of what they wanted to get away from in Wrath of the Lich King.
Yeah, because that was... You had a shaman in a Lich King raid, and that's all they did, was chain heal, chain heal, chain heal.
That's when I started healing, towards the end of Wrath, and that's what I was taught to do. So,
That's what I would...
yeah.
They said literally do nothing but chain heal and keep her shit in the tank.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much. And, and that's also when you had dedicated tank healers and dedicated raid healers over now, where a healer can but your healers kind of take on both sides. A lot of raids in Lich King is you had a tank or a disc priest as a tank healer, or a paladin, not a tank, as a tank healer. Like, that was your tank healer, and that's all they did, was spam heals on the tank. And then you had a druid or a holy priest or a shaman or something on the raid. And that's a lot of reasons why shamans are told to use nothing but chain heal. So, that was pretty much it.
Yeah. Those were the bad days. I was healing during those days. But I was doing 10-man strict on my shaman.
I think, kind of coming back to something we were talking about a little bit ago, I think shamans are kind of getting the shaft in,
Ooh, that
just kind of in
that kind of sounded dirty.
in the perception arena, but I can see a progression-minded guild looking at their healing roster and saying, yes, this class brings a lot of stuff, and yes, it can save raids, but if we bring this one, maybe we won't need any of that at all.
Yeah,
and
that's essentially it.
I can't fault that line of thinking, because there's nothing wrong with it, and it is definitely valid, but it's, I think, like I said, shamans are kind of being victimized by perception rather than what might actually be happening.
Yeah. I on the note of looking at shamans and bringing them, Method brought a shaman to their Lei Shen kill, and that shaman had, and we know that people like change out their gear and do weird stuff, but this shaman was literally jamming full spirit, which would make sense if he was being a mana battery. But he also had DPS trinkets on. One DPS trinket on.
Which one was it? Can you tell me?
Is that a haste proc?
It was the haste proc one, I believe, or maybe it wasn't. It was whatever. Was it Light of the Cosmos? Maybe he had Light of the Cosmos on.
So what I imagine that is for is supercharge healing type totem. So basically, what he's looking at doing is taking a guess here. Was he also spec'd into Elemental Mastery?
I don't believe so. No, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary.
That's strange then.
I mean, I was speculating. We were speculating different things. I was speculating that maybe they took them so he would just literally dump all his mana so they wouldn't activate any of the pillars that they didn't have to activate. They would just let him Healing Rain, dump all his mana on a phase, and then just let him sit there.
Yeah, maybe.
That was what I was theorizing, because
that's really strange.
Because he could just Healing Tide. Everyone would be taking loads of damage. The Mastery, he had about 5k in Mastery, and they would just be getting healed up like crazy because he could just drop all his totems and hold outside of the pillars, and they could just let the raid take AoE damage. That's what I was guessing. Was that's kind of what they were doing, trading off and then dropping Mana Tide whenever they could.
That's quite strange because with Elemental Mastery, there, what I think he could be doing. Yeah, he may have changed it before he logged out, and you may be right. But he could also be just holding that trinket, and then, 10 seconds where he needs to drop his Healing Tide, be starting to Lightning Bolt and throwing out Flame Shocks and things like that to try and get this trinket proccing. And once it does proc, the int proc, I think, or is it haste proc on Light of the Cosmos?
It was haste.
Yeah, so haste proc, and then he pops Elemental Mastery and pops his Healing Tide totem. He is at triple to quadruple the amount of haste that he should be at when he dropped it, and he's probably getting maybe 4 or 5 extra ticks on that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it's got to be something. No, it is an int proc. Never mind, I'm lying.
Even the int proc would be nuts. Really good, really good with that.
The trinket has a lot of haste on it by itself.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's something they were gimmicking the statues to where they could hold off and not activate them, the pillars. Which would make the most sense, because if they could literally gimmick the whole first part of the fight, then the rest of the fight would be a joke. And the shaman could literally just sit there and spot heal for the remainder of the fight until the last phase, and then he could just do the same thing again.
Yeah, that's an interesting strategy. And that comes back to what we were talking about with changing changing strategy to fit what a shaman is doing.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, and if the group's not willing to do it, then they probably shouldn't run a shaman, at least in serious progression.
Right.
That was just something that I noticed. Somebody was talking about how they were stacking spirit, and I was like, there's got to be a reason they would stack spirit, because they did I don't see why a guild would do that. I mean, just maybe changing the trinkets and some gear out, but why would you redo all of your enchants, redo all of your jewel crafters gems just to confuse people? As a Resto shaman, you could just change into transmog gear before you logged out, some low level gear, and then just be done with it.
Yeah, I don't know. People on the forums.
I didn't even see
that sounds intelligent. That sounds really intelligent. Instead of burning money on putting up some sham, you just hit your little gear manager onto some greens and log out.
Yeah, LOL greens and just that's it. You know, like that would make the most sense, right? So I mean, I don't think they would do that much. Like I've seen people log out in funky trinkets and maybe some gear, and then they're all stat funked. All their stats are screwed up.
Well,
That's common.
I've seen people log out like in the Rate My Tune threads, and they log out in their transmog or their city gear, which is like a mixture of blues and greens from vanilla to Burning Crusade things. And when
Right.
you ask them, well, why are you using that? Well, it looks cool. Well, great, it looks cool, but you're asking us to rate you, and you're not in your actual gear.
Are they rate your transmog or rate?
No, like
No.
rate my gear. Like, am I doing okay for this? Type of thing.
Oh.
Am I reforged correctly? And then they log out in the wrong gear.
Like log out in level 15 gear.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're not hit capped by like 95%. You might need to run stockades a couple more times.
Yeah.
A couple thousand more times.
And then they get all like uppity and defensive when you ask them, well, why are you asking us to rate your gear if you're not actually in your gear?
I think it's an obvious troll. I don't know.
I don't know though, because there are people that will log out in their correct gear and they're like, "Am I reforging correctly?" And you say, "No, you should actually be doing blah blah blah." And they're, "Oh, I know how to play my class."
Why'd you ask?
But
Yeah, those are the worst people in raids when you like try to give somebody like advice or maybe like a gimmick for a certain fight, and they're like, "Don't tell me what to do. I know how to play my class," and they get super defensive and like get
Yes.
pissed off for the whole night.
the druid I healed with, and Shamie knows, for is probably the worst druid on the face of the earth, and
Did not
we had a
use-
huge issue. Well, to give you an example, and you can extrapolate from this, he refused to use Tree of Life because he didn't like it because it was a cooldown, but he was specting to Incarnation because it was the best talent on the tier. Figure that one out.
Yeah, and
It
his
doesn't make any sense on any level.
Exactly.
and in
exactly.
one of the Elegon attempts before he was tossed and we ended up with a shaman healer, he used what, Tranquility once in 19 attempts?
Yep. He was very bad,
And
and,
it
I
was-
tried to give him advice, and he goes, "It's my gear, it's my gear. I just have bad gear. When I have better gear, I'll be better." And I'm like,
No.
gear's not going to make you have better than a 30% uptime on Harmony. And he's like, "Now you're mad at me." And I'm like, "No, I'm not mad at you, because being mad doesn't fix anything." And he was like, "Well, I don't see anything that needs fixed. I just see you trying to tell me how to play the game." And at that point's when he was let go.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't believe healers need gear because our
They
kind of-
don't.
our rating strategy since the beginning of bot was basically don't give the tanks gear, don't give the healers gear. DPS gets gear first, and then the rest will get all the leftovers. And it worked. I mean, it worked fine.
I
Healers
do-
had no problem. We two-healed everything
Oh.
that could be two-healed.
Yeah, I do agree with the whole, gear your DPS first before you gear other people. Because a healer's getting gear is not going to make as significant of a difference as DPS getting gear.
Yeah, I didn't
So,
just from like the PTR fights and stuff, I felt that having a little bit more gear on the DPS would actually just be significantly better for the healers if they knew how to play their class.
That's my soapbox that I've been on recently when people keep saying that they're having trouble healing because stuff is alive too long, so they'll add another healer so they can heal through stuff taking longer to kill. But if the problem is stuff not dying fast enough, you're going in the complete opposite direction of where you should be going. You should be DPSing more, not taking away another DPS for a healer. It makes no sense to me, honestly.
I think a good but extreme example is Megara at the moment. With the breaths, if they do more than sort of 3 breaths, the tanks are very likely to die if there's no pain suppression or anything like that available. And like, that's a perfect example of why you want to gear your DPS first for the healers. Like, if these heads are dying fast enough that they're not getting 3rd breaths, then the healers are having a much easier time on the tanks because there's less damage. And I think that's true of a fair few fights in this tier with sort of the tank swapping mechanics. Like G-Kun has a tank swap debuff, Jinrock does, Horadon does, like just about all the fights I can think of do.
I know Fang's another one last year. Like, the faster you push the phase, the less damage you'd have to deal with.
Right.
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, once I get my spirit to where I can heal the fight without, being hardened with no regen CDs to use, at that point, I'm good. Obviously, getting new gear is fun and all, but I think once your regen is set where you can heal the fight, everything else is just bonus.
Yeah. If you need more spirit, use a spirit flask or reforge into more spirit,
Yeah.
Put some spirit gems in your gear. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just how I've seen it.
Yeah, whereas if every piece of gear that a DPS gets helps not only them, but it helps the tanks because stuff is dying faster, so they're taking less damage and are less likely to die because the fight's shorter, and helps the healers because the fights are shorter, whereas me getting gear doesn't really help anyone.
Well, your atonement is kind of awesome, but I personally have always gotten lucky because I've never been in a group with anybody else who could use Intel Mail. I've been with hunters or enhancement shamans who use Mail, but I've always been the only Resto shaman in there, so I've gotten the gear. But I personally know that if I was in there with another elemental shaman, or if I was on a priest in there with a shadow priest or anything like that, I would give the gear in order to allow the DPS to do better.
See, I raid with a shadow priest, and that's why most of my gear, like forever, if Valor didn't exist, I would be raiding naked for the most part because the actual raid drops go.
Didn't you do like
DPS.
Didn't you do a successful Elegon attempt in your pirate hat, or was that a successful Spirit
That
King?
that was Spirit Kings in the pirate hat.
I did a lot of things like that in Dragon Soul. I think at one point I healed solo healed Heroic Warmaster Blackhorn in PvP gear because I didn't notice.
Yeah, I've done the PvP gear thing before. Been doing, it was just a heroic, but I've been doing battlegrounds. And a friend was like, "Oh, come heal a heroic," and I'm like, "Okay." So we're going through the heroic, and I'm seeing mana low, and I'm like, "Dang, where does my mana go?" And people must be being dumb and standing and stuff. And I'm going, and we finally get to the last boss, who drops a trinket. And I actually needed, so I opened up my character pane to decide which trinket I'm gonna use, and notice that I did the whole thing in my V gear.
Yeah, on our first heroic Garrelon kill, we got it pretty early, and we used 2 healers. We had a Resto Druid and a Resto Shaman. And our Resto Druid was in Boom King gear, and our Resto Shaman was in LE PvP gear.
Yep.
I, back on Dragon Soul, when I was using a staff instead of a sword and shield, because I could never get that shield to drop on my Shaman, I didn't realize that one of my attempts I did with a fishing pole equipped.
Fishing pole, chef's hat, yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah,
Yep,
and this was in the time where the only thing you got spell power from was your weapon and intel.
I tanked a BC heroic wearing a fishing pole and spent like the whole time I was a feral druid at the time, complaining the whole time that I'd lost like 1,000 hit points somewhere, and I was raging because I had no idea where my hit points went. And then finally somebody's like, have you noticed what you're wielding? And it was my fishing pole. But in my defense, I was a feral druid. You cannot tell.
Yeah.
I was wielding.
I can't tell you how many times I was like in Dragon Soul, and I don't, because I switched between tank and boomkin, because we'd always won tank madness. So I would just go log off after the end of the night, and I'd come back the next week because I wouldn't play my druid for the whole week because they just made me play it because that was the most scared tune I had. And then I would come back the next week. The trash would be cleared. I'd be late because I'd be running late from work. I'd come in and pull the boss in my boomkin gear as the tank. Every time. So I just get like killed, and they're like, "What the heck's wrong with you? Like, are you not using your cooldowns or something?" I'm like, "I'm in boomkin gear." Like every other week.
Yeah, the one time I actually tanked Dragon Soul on my Feral Druid, they didn't have another tank, so I solo tanked up through Hagara, which was interesting. But this was the reason why I started making gear sets in the character panel to easily switch through gear, because I didn't realize that I double-clicked some of the things from... Like, I put my Feral gear on, and then I accidentally put some of the Resto gear back on. So for the entire time, I was solo tanking Dragon Soul as a Feral Druid with half Resto gear, half Feral gear.
Oh. Well, it's functionally possible, I guess.
I mean, it was okay. We had a really good healer who was actually in heroic Dragon Soul gear and only doing the raid because she was bored and she wanted to help friends out. So she was able to keep me up for the entire time, but it took me until we down, I think it was Yershaw's. It was the boss with like the colored oozes, until I finally realized, wait, I'm not in a full set of feral gear. And as soon as I switched over, even I noticed there was a big difference between how much damage I was taking. But it's getting late, guys, so let's hear Vero. Oh, Vero's not in here anymore. She's raiding. Heh.
Totally ditched us.
I didn't even realize she left. So are there any questions from the chat before we go? She has all the links to...
She left you all hanging.
Pretty much. Well, we normally...
She is not a heifer.
She just took off and didn't even say bye to you guys. Like, that was so rude.
She did say in IRC that she had to go read.
Oh,
she did, but I wasn't paying. I don't have sounds on, and I've been farming as we've been doing this. But so I think that's about it. I guess I'll be Vero, and I would like to thank Convict Fish for coming and hanging out with us and giving us that insight of a 10-man heroic raider. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. So before we actually leave or anything like that, is there any questions in the Twitch chat? Milk!
I just wanted to say I did not call Vero a heifer. I was talking about myself.
Oh, well, I don't think so. So I think that's it. So, like us on Facebook. What is our Facebook?
We're professionals, but I
Google.
have no idea.
So like us on
Probably on the
Facebook. It's facebook.com/outofmanapodcast, all one word. You can always find us on Twitter at oompodcast. You can join us in the IRC at outofmana.com/heelchat. You can always email us at oompodcast@gmail.com. And I'm pretty sure that covers everything. So bye, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Live long and Manatide.
Yeah.
Ian's lying. He was not forced.
I wasn't?
He was coerced. There's a difference.
I was bribed. Blackmailed.
Bribed.
Bye.